Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Have you ever wondered what would happen if tomorrow suddenly all laws, police, and government vanished? Would we be free and happy, or would we tear each other apart in a matter of days? This is the question that haunted one of history's sharpest and most controversial thinkers. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of Thomas Hobbes and his magnum opus, Leviathan. We'll explore why a man obsessed with fear ended up crafting the most potent justification for the absolute state, and why his ideas still echo in our modern debates about security and freedom. Before we begin, a quick note. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of what we're discussing. They won't always be literal representations, but rather a visual companion to help your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. To understand Hobbes, we must first understand his world. He wasn't born into times of peace, but under the shadow of an imminent threat. The year was 1588, and the Spanish Armada was approaching England's coasts. Panic gripped the population. His mother, terrified by news of the invasion, gave birth prematurely. Hobbes himself would later utter a phrase that would define his life and philosophy. He said that his mother bore twins, himself and fear. Fear wasn't just an emotion for him, it was the engine of his entire system of thought. Hobbes lived through a period of extreme turbulence. He witnessed the English Civil War, a bloody conflict pitting Parliament against the king. He saw authority crumble and neighbors kill one another over political and religious differences. It was absolute chaos. This context is crucial. While other philosophers envisioned utopias or trusted in the natural goodness of humanity, Hobbes looked out his window and saw violence, betrayal, and death. He wondered how it was possible to stop that bloodshed and restore order permanently. To answer that, Hobbes decided to act like a scientist. In the 17th century, the scientific revolution was booming thanks to figures like Galileo, whom Hobbes deeply admired. He decided to apply the methods of geometry and physics to the study of politics and human nature. His premise was radical for his time. Hobbes rejected the idea that humans possess a mystical soul or a final divine purpose. For him, we are matter in motion. We are complex biological machines that respond to physical stimuli from our environment. Imagine the human body as an automaton. According to Hobbes, everything we do, think, or feel is the result of mechanical movements within us. Our desires and aversions aren't lofty moral choices, but physical reactions. We approach what gives us pleasure and recoil from what causes us pain. In this materialist system, there's no good or evil in a cosmic sense. What we call good is simply what we desire, and what we call evil is what we hate or fear. And the greatest of all evils, the one all human beings instinctively avoid, is violent death. But here arises the problem. If we are all machines seeking our own survival and pleasure, what happens when two people want the same thing that they cannot share? Hobbes tells us that inevitably, they become enemies. To illustrate this, Hobbes invites us to conduct a thought experiment. He asks us to imagine what human life would be like before the existence of any society, government, or law. This hypothetical state he called the state of nature. In the state of nature, there are no police or judges. We are all fundamentally equal. Perhaps you are stronger, but I can be more cunning, or I can join others to overcome you while you sleep. No one is powerful enough to be safe from everyone else forever. This equality of faculties generates an equality of hope. We all believe we can achieve what we want, but since resources are limited, competition arises. And from competition comes diffidence or distrust. And from distrust, the desire for glory and reputation to intimidate rivals. Hobbes identifies these three principal causes of quarrel in human nature: competition, diffidence, and glory. Without a common power to keep us all in awe, these passions lead us to a state of permanent conflict. It is here that Hobbes utters his most famous and bleak phrase. In this state of nature, there is no place for industry, nor for art, nor for science, because the future is uncertain. The life of man is, and I quote directly, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. This is what Hobbes calls the war of all against all. It doesn't mean we're physically fighting every second, but rather that we live in a constant disposition to battle, like when the sky is gray, and we know a storm could erupt at any moment. Think about it for a moment. Even today in our civilized society, we lock our doors at night. We carry weapons or alarms. We distrust strangers on dark streets. Hobbes would say that with these acts, we are accusing humanity just as much as he did with his words. In this total war, nothing is unjust. Where there is no common power, there is no law, and where there is no law, there is no injustice. Force and fraud are, in war, the two cardinal virtues. It's a terrifying vision, isn't it? But Hobbes doesn't leave us there. Fortunately, humans also have passions that incline us toward peace, the fear of death, the desire for a comfortable life, and the hope of obtaining it through industry. And most importantly, we have reason. Reason suggests rules of peace to us, which Hobbes calls laws of nature. But beware, these aren't laws written in a penal code. They are rational conclusions, theorems that tell us what we must do to preserve our lives. The first and fundamental law of nature is to seek peace and follow it. But if we cannot obtain it, then we have the right to defend ourselves by all possible means. It's a raw and hard calculation of survival. From this first law, the second is derived, that a man be willing, if others are also willing, to lay down his right to all things, and be content with so much liberty against other men, as he would allow other men against himself. This sounds very much like the golden rule, do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. But Hobbes knows words aren't enough. Covenants without the sword are but words, he says, and of no strength to secure a man at all. We need a mechanism to ensure that everyone keeps their end of the bargain. We need to create something stronger than any of us individually. And this is where Hobbes's political solution is born, the social contract. The only way to erect a common power is for all and every one of us to transfer all our power and strength to a single man or to an assembly of men who can reduce all our wills into one single will. It's not just a consent or agreement, it's a true unity. It's as if each one said, I authorize and give up my right of governing myself to this man or to this assembly of men on this condition that you likewise give up your right to him and authorize all his actions in like manner. Once this is done, the multitude so united in one person is called a commonwealth, or in Latin, civitas. This is the generation of that great Leviathan, or rather of that mortal God to whom we owe, under the immortal God, our peace and defense. The Leviathan is a biblical figure, a sea monster of unparalleled power. Hobbes uses this metaphor deliberately. The state must be monstrously powerful to keep at bay the monsters we carry within ourselves. The person who embodies this power is the sovereign, and all others are subjects. The sovereign's power must be absolute. Why? Because if their power were limited, who would judge if they had crossed the line? We would need another superior judge, and so on ad infinitum. For Hobbes, to divide power is to dissolve it. He disliked the idea of the separation of powers that authors like Montesquieu would later propose. For him, a divided power leads to paralysis and ultimately to civil war, which was what he feared most. The sovereign has the right of censorship to decide which doctrines are dangerous, to make war and peace, to judge and to reward. Their actions cannot be questioned by the subjects because by making the pact, the subjects authorize those actions. This is hard to swallow for our modern democratic mindset. Does this mean the sovereign can kill us if they want? Technically, they cannot commit injustice against us because we are the authors of their acts. But Hobbes places a crucial limit. The right to self-defense is inalienable. If the sovereign commands a man to kill himself, wound himself, or cease resisting those who attack him, that man has the liberty to disobey. The purpose of the state is security. If the state tries to kill me, the contract is broken for me. However, outside of the direct defense of one's own life, the subject's liberty is limited to those things which the sovereign has not regulated. Buying, selling, choosing where to live, what to eat. In the silence of the law, the citizen is free. Many critics accused Hobbes of being a defender of tyranny, but he would respond with cold pragmatism. The condition of man can never be without some inconvenience. The greatest tyranny imaginable is, for him, barely a nuisance compared to the misery and horrors of civil war. It's better to have a bad master than no master at all. It's a calculation of risks. We surrender our natural liberty, which is dangerous, in exchange for civil liberty, which is secure. It is the price of civilization. Another fascinating aspect is how Hobbes addresses religion. In his era, religious wars bled Europe dry. For Hobbes, religion could not be an independent power competing with the state. That would create a kingdom within a kingdom. The sovereign must also be the head of the church. He decides which sacred books are read and how they are publicly interpreted. It doesn't matter what you believe in your heart, that's private. But in the public square, there is only one authority. Hobbes demystifies religion and subjects it to political power to neutralize its violent potential. For him, the fear of spirits and hell was a source of instability that the sovereign needed to control. Curiously, although Hobbes defended absolutism, his premises are the roots of modern liberalism. Think about it. He starts from the individual, not the community. He believes in the natural equality of men, and he bases government on the consent of the governed. Unlike the proponents of the divine right of kings who said God placed the king on the throne, Hobbes says power comes from below, from us, the people. If the Leviathan falls, it's because we failed to uphold it, or it failed to protect us. Hobbes's legacy is immense. He forced us to look in the mirror and see our capacity for violence. He taught us that social order is fragile and artificial, something we must actively build and maintain, not something given by nature. Today, when we debate how much state surveillance is acceptable to prevent terrorism, or what liberties we must sacrifice during a pandemic, we are having a conversation with Thomas Hobbes. His shadow looms large. Is fear the only solid foundation for society? Hobbes believed so. He thought benevolence and love were too weak to hold an entire country together. Only the fear of punishment ensures we keep our promises. However, his vision also has a hopeful side. If the state is a machine created by man, it means we can understand it, repair it, and improve it. We are not condemned by fate. We are the architects of our own security. Hobbes died at 91 years old, an incredible age for his time. His last words were supposedly, "I am about to take my last voyage, a great leap in the dark." A perfect phrase for someone who spent his life trying to illuminate the darkness of politics. In the end, Leviathan is not an apology for dictators, but a sober warning. It is a reminder that civilization is a very thin layer of ice over a deep ocean of chaos. And Hobbes asks us, how much are you willing to pay to keep that ice from breaking? I want you to take this thought with you. The next time you complain about a law or a tax, remember the alternative Hobbes put forward. Remember the state of nature. Is he right? Is man a wolf to man? To understand Leviathan is to understand the foundations of the modern state. It is to recognize that politics is ultimately about how we manage our fear and how we build peace among strangers. I hope this journey through Thomas Hobbes' thought has sparked new questions for you. Philosophy isn't there to give us easy answers, but to make us uncomfortable and force us to think more deeply about who we are. If you found this analysis valuable, the best way to support the channel is by subscribing and sharing this video. Help us continue building this small Leviathan of knowledge against ignorance. Let me know in the comments. Do you believe human beings are good by nature and society corrupts them, as Rousseau would argue? Or are you with Hobbes that we are dangerous and need control? I'll read your thoughts carefully. I'm your host on this adventure of knowledge. Thank you for lending me the most valuable things you have, your time and your attention. I'll see you in the next video as we continue to unravel the mysteries of our history. Until then, let's delve a little deeper into the mechanics of the pact. Hobbes specifies that the pact is irrevocable. Once you've given your power to the Leviathan, you cannot demand it back just because you don't like how it's used. This seems extreme, but for Hobbes, the alternative is constant instability. If we could revoke power every time the ruler made a mistake, we would revert to the chaos of civil war in a matter of months. Furthermore, Hobbes argues that the sovereign does not make a pact with the subjects. The pact is among the subjects themselves. The sovereign is the result of the pact, not one of the parties. Therefore, the sovereign cannot break the contract because they never signed anything. This gives the ruler total legal immunity. They can act immorally, yes, and will have to answer to God, but to their subjects, their actions are always legitimate. It's an ironclad logic. But let's return to Hobbes' psychology. His mechanistic view extended to language. For him, words are counters, like chips in a game. The problem arises when we use words without clear physical meaning, such as essence or transubstantiation. He believed that much political and religious confusion stemmed from the misuse of language. Absurd definitions led to absurd thoughts. Leviathan is also an attempt to cleanse political language, to make it precise like mathematics. Hobbes dedicates the entire first part of the book to defining terms: what imagination is, what memory is, what reason is. He doesn't start by talking about kings. He starts by talking about how the human brain works. He builds his edifice from the ground up. Imagination for him is simply decaying motion. It is the inertia of a sensation we had before. When we dream, it is that internal motion that continues to vibrate. Everything is physics. Everything is matter colliding with matter. This materialist vision earned him many enemies. They called him an atheist, though he denied it. In the 17th century, being called an atheist was a sentence of social death. His books were publicly burned in Oxford years after his death. Despite the controversy, his influence was unstoppable. Royalists hated him because he based power on the people and not on God. Parliamentarians hated him because he defended the absolute power of the king. Hobbes was alone on his own intellectual island. But that solitude gave him freedom. Owing no loyalty to any faction, he could write with brutal honesty. He didn't write to please, he wrote to solve the problem of human coexistence once and for all. There's a detail on the book's frontispiece that is often overlooked. The giant's body is made of people, yes, but they all look towards the giant's head, towards the sovereign. No one looks at each other. The relationship is vertical, not horizontal. This reinforces the idea that society is not a natural family, it's an artifice. Without the sovereign, these people are not a people. They are just a dissolved multitude. It is power that transforms us into a body politic. Hobbes also discusses the liberty of the ancients. He criticized how universities taught admiration for the Greeks and Romans, who loved republican liberty. For Hobbes, that interpretation was poison because it incited rebellion against monarchs. He preferred the stability of an empire to the turbulence of a republic. He believed that democracy was flawed because assemblies are prey to rhetoric and passions. A single king might be corrupt, but an entire assembly is much easier to corrupt. Let's think about corruption. If a king enriches himself, he and his favorites get rich. But in a democracy, every member of the assembly wants to enrich themselves, their family, and their friends. The economic burden on the people, according to Hobbes, is greater. It's a cynical argument, perhaps, but it has an internal logic. Hobbes always seeks the lesser evil. He doesn't seek paradise on earth, he seeks to avoid hell on earth. He is a philosopher of fear, yes, but also of prudence. What about private property? In the state of nature, it doesn't exist. You only have what you can keep by force. Property is a creation of the state. It is the sovereign who defines what is yours and what is mine. Therefore, you cannot claim an absolute right to property against the sovereign, because without him, you would have no property at all. The state can impose taxes or confiscate goods if necessary for common security. This brings us back to the central tension, security versus liberty. Hobbes leans entirely towards security. For him, absolute liberty is simply the freedom to die at the hands of your neighbor. However, there is one area where Hobbes is surprisingly modern: equality before the law. Once the sovereign makes a law, it must apply to all subjects equally. The rich and powerful should not have impunity. The sovereign's justice must be impartial, not because they are good, but because injustice generates resentment, and resentment generates rebellion. And rebellion is what the sovereign must most avoid to survive. So even in his absolutism, there is a pragmatic check. The tyrant who abuses their people too much runs the risk of being overthrown, returning to the state of nature. The king's self-interest is to keep their people prosperous and content. Leviathan was written in Paris while Hobbes was in exile. It was published in 1651, just after King Charles I's head rolled on the scaffold. It was a book designed to convince people to accept the new government, whatever it might be. In fact, Hobbes returned to England under Cromwell's rule. This proved his point. Legitimacy comes from the ability to protect, not from royal lineage. If Cromwell held the sword and maintained order, then he was the temporary Leviathan. This flexibility allowed him to survive in dangerous times. He was a man who practiced what he preached, his first law of nature, to seek peace and defend oneself. He survived kings, dictators, and plagues. Towards the end of his life, Hobbes continued writing and translating. He translated the Iliad and the Odyssey into English when he was already over 80 years old. His mind never rested, always active, always mechanical. His legacy is not having been right about everything, but rather having posed the correct questions. What is the nature of power? Why do we obey? What legitimacy does the state have? These are the questions that founded political science. Even his greatest critics, like John Locke or Rousseau, had to start by refuting Hobbes. You cannot ignore him. He is the great elephant, or rather the great sea monster in the room of philosophy. So today, when you watch the news and feel that fear for the world's instability, remember that you are not the first to feel it. 4 centuries ago, a man felt that same fear and built a cathedral of logic to protect us from the rain.